How I went from never reading books to reading books every single day without missing a single day. And no, it's not a boring story. It's not one of those boring ideologies or ideas or stories that you hear online about, oh, you have to read 10 pages every day. It's none of that. It's as natural as it can get from my own personal experience. And look, I always wanted to read books. I always heard about these people, about Elon Musk reading books every day when he was young, and that's why he's whatever, the richest man in the world right now. Read about all these people that read books all the time, read books every day, but I never was able to actually do it, right? And that's the truth, whether I liked it or not. I could have read a book or two, right, in a year, but I was never able to read books every day. Now, I will share with you my story, how I dealt with it, right? How I dealt with actually getting to the point of reading books every day. What are the hard things that I faced and how I solved them, and also the tips and tricks that I use. Now, for me personally, how it all started is once I looked at my life and I did an analysis for myself. A small thinking would do. I just thought myself, in the best version of myself, the best periods when I was the best version, what was I doing at that time? And I found out that I was reading books. So I found out a very direct correlation between me being the best version of myself and me actually reading books. They always go hand in hand. So I said, that's kind of interesting. So I have to read books. And later on, I did even a deeper analysis, tracking a lot of metrics in my life and see what are the metrics that have a direct correlation with me being the best version of myself or the worst version of myself, or, that spectrum. And I found out that it's true. Being the best version of myself every single time I am reading books in that period. So something that has such a huge leverage, such a huge compensation, such a huge return or consequences, I have to do it every day. It must be it must be a priority for me to read every single day. And since that day, I remember I was with my mother before she died in the hospital, and I decided I'm going to read books every day. And I never missed a day since then. Now, I don't read books that you might think about. I read books that I actually like. Now, you can read, novels. You can read stories. That's not for me, right? I don't go and read the Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones books, or Harry Potter books. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not for me. It could be for you. Go on, do whatever you want. But for me, what I personally find better is biographies, finance, psychology, self-help books. These type of books that are actually, or mental health even, psychology. So these books are the type of books that I can actually utilize them the most. And at the same time, it's the books that I really like reading, and it's the aspects of my life that I really like to work on, a lot on. So me reading these books, it's not only just me reading the book for the sake of reading a book, but it's actually getting what the value of the book is. And now we get to the lesson number one I learned. It's the most important lesson. Is reading just for the sake of reading is useless. But actually applying what you read is the essence of reading in the first place. Reading is learning, is consuming knowledge, whatever you want to call it, right? Is getting exposed to knowledge, or great people, great knowledge, or specified knowledge to be exact, without practicing or getting into actually physically doing what you're reading. The entire idea of reading becomes pointless, right? And this is one of the first lessons that I've learned while reading, is that once you read something, apply it in the real world. If you're not going to apply it, if you're not applying it literally instantly, then it doesn't make sense even to read it. So it's almost as functional reading instead of just reading for the sake of reading. And this is not only my ideology, as also Tim Ferriss, who's one of the greatest, industrial writers when it comes to business books, who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week, one of the best-selling books in the self-help or finance industry, I'm pretty sure in history of all time. So in the 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss has talked about this particular topic, and he said, I always make sure that when I read books, I apply them instantly. If I cannot apply the information of which I am consuming, I do not read it, or I do not consume it. And this makes a very good distinction between reading for the sake of entertainment and reading for the sake of actually learning and getting better and using the information you read. And this is what makes a difference between people. So going back to my story, actually applying what I read, and look, books usually, instead, as long as you choose the right books, you're gonna get a lot of information. You're gonna get a lot of value, right? One of the first books I read was Think and Grow Rich. Once I started reading every day, one of the first books I read from there, it was Think and Grow Rich. And look, until today, which is what? It was like August, I don't know. It's just a long time, right? Long time ago. I'm pretty sure, okay, let's do it. Let's not say a long time ago. I need to be precise. It was 1 year and 10 months. 1 year and 10 months or 1 year and 9 months, right? So 1 year and 9 months ago, I started reading books every single day. I never missed a day since then. One of the first books I started with is Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich is one great of a book that I had to reread it since then. So for 1 year and 9 months, which is the equivalent of 21 months, I was rereading a book not every single day, but every time I was rereading the books, or at least chapters of it. And that just shows how much informationally condensed the book is. I can now just use all of the information I'm reading at once, because the amount of information overload in the book and the amount of value that is, you cannot extract it from one go, from one read, right? It's almost like going to lectures, almost as reading and studying in college. In studying in college, we have a subject, we have a module, and really you get 60 hours of it. You get 120 hours. And a lot of the times, it's just the professor repeating and repeating and repeating, and you're going and you study in different ways, in different aspects. But the point is, without that repetition, you won't even be able to get to that level of actually being able to apply the knowledge that you study, right? So the same thing applies for books. If you're going to read a book, if it's a great book, and you actually want to apply everything in it, you won't be able to. At least you won't be able to apply everything. So a lot of the times, it's good to apply something, which is, hopefully that's what you do, but to be able to extract the amount of information that you want to extract, it needs time. And also you need to build the habit of actually doing what it is. I remember before I started reading books, a few years back, I was reading some books sometimes. And when I get to the books, they give these exercises, right? So as an example, get a piece of paper or go in your notebook and journal, right? I don't know any books that say journal, but you got the point. I'm just saying a random exercise that comes to my mind. Or let's be more specific, write your goals, write a specific goal in a certain way, and they give you the instructions. I always used to do that before I started reading. When I get to these chapters, I just read them and move on. And I'm like, well, I do that, or I will do that, but I never do. The point of the books is actually applying especially those exercises, because it's literally an action plan. The easiest thing to apply in books is those periods when they give you some sort of exercises or an action plan or a challenge, whatever the book actually titled that section, where he says, go get a paper, write this. Or go do something. Like for our work week that I gave you as an example earlier, he has a lot of challenges that you need to go to girls and fear or actually confront your fear of rejection. Ask them for your number. You have to do that. You have to look at people in the eyes. Obviously, they give you like instructions, like for 2 days, you got to do this. Applying what you read, applying what you learn is the entire essence of reading. Reading for the sake of reading is pointless. Obviously, except if you want to read novels and romance and whatever stories. But I'm pretty sure if you're watching this video, probably you don't even care about random stories. You don't care about the Ice and Fire or you know, Harry Potter. Sure, you can read those or watch those in your free time as an entertainment. But when we're talking about actually reading, and if you're someone who wants to read every single day, usually you want it to be better yourself, to actually be better. And being better is literally being, so doing better. You can't just think better or just read better. You have to do better. And to do better, you're reading to apply what you read, right? And that's the entire thing. That's the entire essence. So right now, and look, there's books that are hard to actually apply. I've read a lot of books about CEOs of $1 billion companies where there is no chance in hell I am applying this now. It's just what it is. It's just the truth. But at least I try to, or I get that advice, compartmentalize it and put it in my daily life. If he talks like, you have to be clear with your team and whatever bullshit, I don't know. I wouldn't give something on the top of my head and be a bad example, but I just give that information and I extract the most I can do with it. So if he says, I have to take the brave choice, I make sure that I take the brave choice. I'm pretty sure he's talking about some private equity not selling to an investor when you get a good deal and you have $1 billion company type of situation. While I might not have that, but I will be brave in my own situation, in my own shoe. I cannot probably emulate or stimulate or simulate the entire situation of having $1 billion company and having an investor wanting to buy it from me, but I can simulate the bravery that comes with it. The decision making, the accountability, the responsibility that comes with it in my own little thing. Oh, we have a project and people want to be with me with it. No, they're not going to be with me with it. That's my scale of actually simulating what that lesson is. And what you find out is, very fast, is that those lessons that you actually apply are the lessons that stay with you forever, right? It's literally the exact lessons that stay with you forever. I will give you a good example. Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Work Week, one of the hardest challenges I've seen in a book, which is you go to 2 girls in 2 days, or I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure if it's 4 girls cumulative or 2 days in 2 days, like in two girls in the span of 2 days. You got the point, but it was one of the two. So you go to 2 girls for 2 days, ask them for their phone number. Straightforward. And he's like, I don't care if you're a girl or a man, you're gonna go to the opposite sex, obviously opposite gender, and ask them for their number. And here, the entire lesson or the entire point is not getting the number, but it's actually facing or asking for what you want, getting used to not only facing rejection, but also asking for what you want. It was one of the hardest decisions that I've ever made, or one of the hardest challenges that I have to make. But I knew, because I read it, and because of my values and my principles and the lesson that I'm teaching you here, I have to apply it. Because otherwise I'm just reading for the sake of reading. No, I read to apply. I know the book, I know it's good, I believe in it, I know the value of it, and I know it's good for me, so I will do it anyway. Although I hate it, I don't want to go to the fucking girl. I don't want to ask for her number. Right? I've never done that in my fucking life. And guess what I did? I went to the girls and I asked for the goddamn fucking number. All of them said no, but I did the goddamn fucking challenge. And that's the entire point of actually applying these sort of challenges, that even if you don't like them, some challenges are easy. Like in the same book, they had a challenge that for the next 2 days or a week, you got if you're walking and someone's looking at you, you look at them in the eyes and you make sure that you're not the first person who look away. I already do that anyway. Most of my times, I rarely move my eyes. I'm always the last person who move his eyes, which, you know, it's almost like this uncomfortable situation that your unconscious mind always goes away to the comfortable side. But that's easy for me because I always do that, and it was one of the challenges. The other challenge of the girls, it was hard. I never done that in my entire life. Going to a fucking girl, asking her for her number. Also, it's a conservative city in a conservative country. Brother, that's hard. I was literally overthinking. I was like, fuck, what if they called the goddamn police? Obviously, when I say it now, people laugh at me. But that's what I was thinking. That's what fear doing to you. But that's also what bravery is. Bravery is acting with the presence of fear. So instead, like in spite of fear, whatever. It's like you have fear and then you act. That's bravery, not the absence of fear. Good. The second lesson of reading books every single day is choosing the right books. Now, I know I talked about novels or whatever. If you're into that, just go read them. But the point is, you want to read books that are good, that are actually readable, that are usable for you, for your case and for your goals, and get you closer to your goals, help you become better in any way, shape, or form. So finding the good books are your priority. Now I'll tell you how I deal with it in my own personal life. The biggest advice, the biggest secret is listen to the people that I already like, that already have what I have, already have what I want. So if there is any mental whatever model that you have, and he happens to recommend a book. A lot of people do that, especially successful people that recommend the books that they read all the time on their Instagrams, on their blog, on their YouTube channel, whatever. You find it somewhere. And you're like, huh, he's talking about this book. Podcasts, right? Okay, I'm gonna download that book. And really the point is, you don't want to delay it. The moment they recommend it, go to Google, download that book. Go to Google, download that book. EPUB, it's on my phone now. I read it whenever I want. And usually I read some pages as well to have a good idea. Because usually I really want to read it. So I want to have a good idea what she's talking about, what's the point of it. But really, that's how it is. Think and Grow Rich, the recommendation of the book that I got, it was also a recommendation for people that have what I want. It was also a recommendation for multiple people that have what I want, which is the best case scenario. A lot of the books that I later on read, it was the same thing, recommendation for people that have what I want. Sometimes a good caveat or a secret, which is in the books themselves, in some good books, they have a section which is book recommendation. The author recommends other books. A lot of the times you can find good books there. But the point is, very early on, you'll find yourself having more books than what you can read. So you just go through them and finish them. The third lesson that is absolutely important is you have to understand that some books are for certain periods of life. I'll give you a good example. There's a book called Who Moved My Cheese? One of the best books when it comes to adaptability, adapting, changing. Life is in permanent change, and those who don't change get eliminated. That's a quote from the book. So this book is all about adaptation and change. In the period when my mother died, when she was about to die, I read it. When she died, I reread it. I was reading it for, I don't know how many times, like 3 or 4 times in that period, in that week or 10 days when my mother, or 2 weeks when my mother was dying. Why? Because it's big change. I need to adapt. I need to almost accept change. One of the biggest books that helped me is that book. I've already reread that book multiple times in my life. The first time I read that book, I was 14 years old. But I knew how important that book is, and a lot of the times, you really want to be reminded of the good books in certain times. And even now, a lot of the times, I need certain ideologies to have. I need to be in a certain mental frame, right? I go reread some books. And usually now, as you go, like Who Moved My Cheese is a very small book. But the books you're gonna read, the books I read, you read, we read, you read, are not small books. Usually you have, a few hundred pages. So you can't really reread an entire book because that can take you a long time. What you really want to do is read chapters, reread them. This is how I do it. I say, well, in this period, I'm actually lacking, let's say, in this particular topic, this particular aspect. I'm gonna go, I know the book that talks about it perfectly. I know that it has a certain paragraph that's so perfect. I need that, right? And I go, and with the lesson number 1, I practice, I exercise, I execute whatever I read. If he talks about, if he talks about being able to spot opportunities and always be ready and understand that opportunity is a time-limited equation and always you have to capitalize on opportunities because it's time-limited. And I know in that period, that's what I'm lacking. I go and read that. In that period, I'm executing. I'm looking for opportunities. Obviously, I have to do it every time, but because in that period I've identified that I have a lack, I'm reading that to sort of compensate for the lack. I have to execute whatever I read. So I'm looking for the opportunities. This is an opportunity. I know it's time limited. Let's do it, right? And that's the lesson. That's why I started with lesson number 1. It's so important. It's the most important thing of all this. Is exercising, applying, executing whatever it is that you read. Because without it, nothing else matters. Really, for me, I wouldn't even read if I don't execute what I read. Genuinely. Like, what's the absolute point of reading without executing what I read? It's pointless. But yeah, and look, this is really all what it is. This is what makes me read every single day. Without missing a single shot, without missing a single day. Just reading the books I like, I get recommended by the people who have what I want, and I make sure when I read, I execute. I apply whatever I read. I don't read for the sake of reading. That's bad. I actually execute what I read. That's good. And also, in certain periods, I always reread certain chapters, especially the chapters that I need to work on. And especially because the good books, you can't apply everything from first read. Not even in a billion years. So it's a must that you have to reread and reread and reread and reread the books again and again. A lot of the times you don't reread it all at once, you reread certain chapters. But that's really how it is. That's how I work with it. That's how I deal with it. And that's how I read books every single day, while before I never read a book ever. Thank you for watching and subscribe.